My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to the Coalition online at coalitionradio.us, where we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events. It's great to be back here with you all this week. With me in studio, as always, is the PO taxpayer. PO, good evening.
I'm especially PO'd this week.
As usual. Christina is here, of course. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
We, PO, had a barn burner last night, in my humble opinion.
Tony, you brought the house
I'm still
down.
recovering.
It was astonishing. For all of those who missed it, and there will be a third one, we had Liberty Drinks 2 last night in scenic West Warwick at Manchester 65, an outstanding venue. We had people from all over New England who were Liberty folks. We had people from the Free State Project. We had people from the Massachusetts LP, that's shorthand for Libertarian Party. We had folks from the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. We had Second Amendment folks. We had Oath Keepers. We had a potty. We had beer. We had wine. And we had Patrick Seamus again on the guitar. It was just an outstanding evening. You know, so much of our interaction politically these days is based on digital social media. So you crave that kind of interaction where, you know, you're talking to people, you're chatting with people online from across New England, and all of a sudden, in the warm surroundings of West Warwick, Rhode Island, we were able to actually put faces to the names, extend the heated arguments that we've had online, except now we have to be polite to each other. It was just great. And Tony, outstanding job again. You know, Tony is a one-man social media here in Rhode Island. Bringing together that type of environment here in Little Rhodey, where we are a petri dish for socialism, is astonishing. So my hat's off to you, Tony. You did a great job. It
was a good time, and it's always a good, you know, when you have a venue like this, I get to, you know, give the most respect to Mr. Vickers giving us his venue for no charge. So you make a club owner very happy when he has to go out and restock his bar, which was the situation last night. He had to go out for supplies.
Right. And he was actually at one moment seen, you know, furiously pumping tap handles personally.
Yeah.
It's that kind of hands-on involvement. And by the way, if you haven't been to Manchester 65, it's a great club. They're getting national acts there. You know, the beauty of the setup last night, Tony, was that you had a room with some great rock and roll. Immediately adjacent, you had some spacious surroundings where we could have cocktails, talk, go back in and listen to some great music. It's you know, it's wonderful to see that type of entrepreneurial showbiz environment here in Little Rhodey. You know, just if you haven't been there, folks, you're missing something. Go down and give it a shot. I was at one point a little verklempt this week, Tony, a little verklempt. Chris, it would appear that the lessons of 38 Special have already been forgotten. Now,
well, this time it'll be different. We promise.
You know, sort of like a bad bookie changing his name so that he can hone his craft in a different part of town. Sort of like Elmer Gantry becoming a New Age evangelist. The Rhode Island Economic Development Commission has morphed into something called the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. Same time, same bat space, same bat station, you know. Unbeknownst to a lot of us, there is, I guess, a 0.003 cent per kilowatt hour tax. And it is a tax, folks, not a contribution. It's not voluntary. You don't get to check a box. That can then be put into an investment slush fund, all right, that can be put into what they call first stage green products. So in all their wisdom, the Rhode Island EDC, I will always call it the Rhode Island EDC, has decided to invest $300,000. And I actually spent an evening reading the legislation. And $300,000 is the limit. Isn't it funny how everybody always max out? Everybody always gets whatever the top money is. No one in Rhode Island, there's always parting gifts. No one ever goes home a loser, except us.
No one ever fills out an application for less than the max.
$300,000 to a company that is a first stage company, as we in the biz like to call it. And they have developed potentially a product that will help to affix solar panels to people's homes' ceilings. Now, let's think about that for a second. Can we think of a single part of the green space, as those in the biz incubator business like to call it, that has been more of a failure internationally than solar panels?
Solar panels are on the upswing at this point, and one of the... No, I'm not justifying the investment. Hold on. The problem with solar panels for a long time was the incredibly high manufacturing cost, and that has been dropping significantly. 40 years ago when they were being invented, it was something like $76 per kilowatt. Now it's 76 cents per kilowatt. We're moving definitely in the right direction. It's just about at the point where it's commercially viable compared to some of its competitors. However, whether Rhode Island and its legislature and its various commissions is qualified to evaluate the worth of any given project and to dump $300,000 into it is a big question. I'm just relieved that it's no longer $75 million.
So for everybody listening that's not privy to our studio location, this conversation right now is taking place in front of a gigantic banner that says renewablenow.biz, bringing you the business side of green.
The only thing renewable in this state seems to be the state's commitment to crony capitalism, because this is the most stunning part. Now, first of all, some would argue that the declining price of solar is due to the fact that Chinese-supported production of solar panels so flooded the market with moderate to inferior product, all right, that essentially a significant part of the world's inventory of solar panels was fire-sailed at bankruptcies. All right,
that could well be. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to work.
Well, okay.
The thing is, it's too early. I think we have no idea whether this commission, whatever its new acronym is, has the wherewithal to evaluate these projects. We don't know whether this company is the best at what it's doing or the worst at what it's doing. We have no idea whether some other company is about to blow it out of the water with a better solution. The problem they're claiming to address is a valid problem and it needs a solution.
But why us?
Why us?
Why us? Why now? Right. I would remind people that in its original incarnation, the Economic Development Commission had people like Mr. Verrecchia, who was one of the senior people at Hasbro. You had serious business professionals all of a sudden getting into this cabal and playing and screwing with our money. Now, I've already started the draft. I've had conversations with the people at the EDC, and I've already started the draft of the letter. I did a blog post on this. And Tony, how do you read our blog?
Coalitionradio.us. Click on PO Taxpayer.
Right. And
if you dare,
and you'll instantly be on the NSA watch list. But one of the few details that's emerged, besides the $300,000, which was throbbing at me from the Providence Journal like a teenage pimple, all right, was the notion that the repayment schedule. Now, get this, Sparky. Their repayment schedule begins after they've demonstrated 6 months of positive cash flow.
Ruh-roh.
All right. Does anyone in this room going to get 300 large?
It reminds me of the hullabaloo about ethanol a few years back. It was kind of the same setup.
And the unintended consequences of ethanol production for fuel ended up...
We're starving Mexicans, but that's okay. No, they don't.
I can't get a decent bag of popcorn.
Right.
So, $300,000 loan to an unproven company. And my mantra on 38 Special was no equity, no board seat, no guarantees, no future. So we're going to keep you informed. This is going to become my little pet issue. I'm going to do whatever I can do to give agita, as they like to say on Federal Hill,
to the powers that be,
to the fine folks.
Right.
Because I see no difference.
The one major difference is that it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the expense of 38 Studio. That's at least they learned one huge lesson. Don't flush an enormous pile of money down the toilet.
Just do it in small increments.
If you make lots of tiny investments, you might accidentally hit a good one.
And there's no fanboy cheerleaders pumping out solar panels.
Well,
right.
Maybe some hippies.
Right.
Well, just a couple of asides that sort of bring this to a close for this week. This is not going to be a vapor issue for us. We're going to ride this every week.
As facts emerge, I don't want to just be babbling about it every week.
Why not? That's what I do.
PO Taxpayers made a career of doing that.
No, there'll be some other worthwhile issue to talk about next week.
This is number one. It's my contention that government should not be picking winners and losers in the free marketplace. Number two, if the investment is significant, if the investment is worthwhile, there is a significant amount of private equity out there that is dying dying for high-quality investments. A lot of money is sitting on the sidelines. All right? If the money's worthwhile, why from us? Why did they have to get it from them?
And if any of those people are listening, I would love $300,000 to start a non-suck radio station. So
right.
And get a hold of me anytime.
We'll start paying you back as soon as we make a profit.
Right. Or yeah.
And that's another point. How do you determine whether a company is making a profit and what gets factored in? If I decide as the CEO that I need to pay myself $500,000 a year, and that puts my company in the red,
well, there's
am I then never making a profit? I never have to pay back the loan?
Well, there's something called generally accepted accounting principles, and then there's Rhode Island math.
Right.
Okay? Never the twain shall meet.
There may be something in the documents that were signed that prevents something like that from happening, but we don't know because no one's telling us.
That's the point. This was, again, does these words remind you of anything? Executive session. This was conducted in closed-door executive sessions.
What a great idea.
What would we know? Why would they want to ask our opinion before they flush three? And you know what? And
or at least keep us informed.
And the whole point is not even if they make or lose money. That's not the point. Government has no business being an investment bank. It's just not part of the skill set. It's not part of the Constitution. Quite frankly, we're surrounded by a government that is incapable of running, legitimate police departments. They're incapable of running higher education. They're incapable of fixing potholes. They're really borderline capable of anything. I mean, most of these people, I don't think could function in a fast food environment. And yet somehow they are going to impose upon us yet more business fiascos. And I guess the last frustration when I express this amongst our progressive friends, because remember, the Coalition on Talk Radio hosts more progressive guests than the rest of Rhode Island media combined. These are folks who are incensed legitimately about 38 Special. They saw nothing wrong because it was giving money to a green project. And all I'm asking for is people to take a moment, reflect within themselves, and these folks are genuine, they're capable of intellectual honesty, and say, if this was for a strip mall instead of for some type of connection device for solar panels, would they be equally as enthusiastic?
Right.
I doubt it.
Or someone's gas station, or, yeah.
Right. So it's time.
Yeah, and your other point really does stand. We have no equity in the project. We don't have a board seat. And as you pointed out with 38 Studios, not having a board seat means you're not privy to certain private information.
You're not cognizant of, folks said in the case of 38 Special, we'd hired IBM to provide a post-game analysis of what was going on. It's too late then. We found that out.
It would have been nice to hire IBM to do a pregame analysis.
Right. It would have been nice to have someone sitting in there in the boardroom seeing real-time cash flow so that maybe they could have changed things. Maybe they could have done some type of preemptive strike.
Right. Or at least we didn't have that. Things weren't being done in secret. We would have known that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe things would have been different. But hey, it's $100 million, and after a while, these things can add up. We could be talking about some real money soon.
Well, I suspect people aren't more outraged about the solar panel issue because of the smaller amount of money involved.
Well, I've posted
300,000 is a lot less frightening than 75 million.
Right, but I posted on the blog site. Last thought on this: I posted on the blog site a litany of green failures, a website link to a site that documents probably about 30 to 40 significant green failures that have occurred, many of which...
What's the proportion, though, of green failures to green successes, and how does that compare?
I honestly, in the marketplace,
Yeah.
in my day job, I work with companies that are general contractors to big energy. I'm not really aware of many significant successes.
If you guys fighting over there?
I
just heard.
Not really.
I know. I mean, it's. I'm not aware of any large scale. You see individual efforts at solar farms. Things are gradually moving in the right direction, but ultimately, it's financially in an environment where cities and towns are broke. It's been a financial disaster.
Right. And we've seen, I think, some successes overseas, although.
Government supported.
Yeah.
The math doesn't make sense yet. And that's not to say it won't, and that's not to say private equity could support a lot of the investment going into making green power a day-to-day reality and a day-to-day economic reality.
I'd also like to see some evidence that we're taking a look at what is happening overseas and learning lessons from it, as opposed to, hey, it's working for Germany, let's just do it. Well,
and why not spend that $300,000 providing regular Rhode Islanders with low-interest loans and smaller, not the big companies, but the smaller, guys like the Providence Apartment Association, all right, who could borrow money at low cost to, further winterize, particularly after
Right.
a difficult winter like this, that's where the money should be going. If you're going to get the government involved, do it on a level that's manageable, that's accessible, that's...
And that's more available to more types of businesses.
Exactly.
Just like some sort of a business microloan program.
Exactly. Well, we are privileged this week to have yet another major candidate here. I'm going to give just a brief description, but we'd like to welcome Rhue Reis here. Rhue has chosen the task of running for the 2nd Congressional District of Rhode Island congressional seat. He's a local guy. What I enjoy about his resume, and we're going to let him talk, but what I enjoy about his resume is that he bridges both worlds. He's been successful in the corporate sense. He's got an MBA from George Washington University in D.C., but he's also run... God forbid, he's gotten his hands significantly dirtied in the dreaded private sector. To me, he reflects really the fabric of Rhode Island running as a citizen for Congress. To me, he reflects, and we'll interpret his stands on different issues, but at first blush, what you see here is the citizen leader, what our founders actually had envisioned when they developed that Constitution thing that sometimes we follow around here.
That thing's still around?
Yeah, that thing's still around here. And by the way, I'm a strict constructionist. It is not a living, breathing thing. It's a set of rules. Okay, deal with it. So I'd like to introduce us to Rhue Reis. A few rules that I'd like to reiterate since we haven't had a candidate on in a few weeks here at the coalition. First of all, we are an outrage porn-free zone. We are not interested in Christmas trees, gun raffles, unless we can make fun of people, all right? All the type of socially divisive issues that take our eye off the economic ball, all right? Our priority in Rhode Island right now is to try and somehow cobble together a state which makes sense for people to live and work in. It doesn't now. Number 2, we do not handicap elections on our show. We are not interested in whether you'll win. We want to know why you should. We don't care if you're raising money. We hope you are. We wish nothing but success to our guests. But ultimately, the focus of the remaining of the show is for Mr. Reis to give us his interpretation of what a great 2nd congressional congressman would make. Because God knows, from a personal perspective, we haven't had one. So, Rhue, welcome to the show. Tell us how you got here.
Well, thank you, Pat. I got here into politics, not actually that I was looking to do it. I was approached and I was asked to get involved. I've been very busy. I've worked 2 jobs for the last 11 years. I've put my 2 daughters through college, and it was an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity. I've complained to my wife, to anybody who would listen to me, about what is going on and the ineffectiveness of our current delegation, the total delegation that represents us in Congress, in both houses of Congress, and their inability to get government under control. And, when I was presented the opportunity to put myself in that environment, at first I kind of laughed. I said, this is crazy. I have too much work. I have a family. I don't have the time that I see that it would take to bring myself up to speed to be able to tackle the challenge of running a campaign that involves, 20-something cities and towns in Rhode Island, that I need to convince the electorate that I am the person that they want to represent them. So in being presented the opportunity to actually take on that challenge, and for all my frustration in seeing what is not being done that needs to be done in Congress, I said to myself, I'm at that point in my life where I can step back and I can take this challenge head on. I know that I'm a strong student and I know I have a lot to learn, but I am ready to study the issues as far as I need to study them to bring myself up to speed so that I can have the answers, develop those answers, and attack the current degree of professional politicians that are no longer representing us from the grassroots. I know what Rhode Islanders are going through. I've been fighting the battle. I've run 2 small businesses in the last 13 years. The frustration is so infuriating dealing with local and state governments that you just wonder why you even do it anymore. And that's why I sold my last business. And now I'm into becoming a contractor, and I'm working every day. I work 6-7 days a week. I never take time off.
Sound familiar, P.O.?
Yeah.
And you know, since this is a time, my oldest is done with college, my youngest is finishing up in May. Finances are pretty much in order for my wife and I. She works full-time. She's been doing that since my kids were in grade school. And, you know, that's all we do is work. And this is a time where I can kind of pull back, step back from my 2 jobs, and focus on winning this election and representing the people, knowing what the people are going through, knowing how poor the direction is of this current government, both state and federal, that, you know, I've been presented the opportunity to run on the Republican ticket. And I said, you know, let's do it.
Tony, tell us, I've got a few questions for Rhue, but in the meantime, the not-so-mighty Twitter is available to us. Tony, why don't you tell us how we can ask questions of the
candidate? It is at Coalition Radio, at Coalition_radio on Twitter, and on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. And, of course, your legitimate questions will be proudly presented to our candidate, our in-studio guest. And if you're an idiot, then your questions will be proudly ignored.
So think carefully before you send us a question.
Rhue, in our brief meeting, because he and I have just met before the show, you know, and I'm stressing this a little heavily on this show, the notion of the citizen candidate, the citizen politician, the citizen elected official. How out of touch do you feel the current congressman from the 2nd District is?
Well, sometimes it's hard to know exactly how far out of touch he is. You never know if he's even around or even aware of what the regular citizen is going through. He never has anything to say. I can't remember the last time I've seen any bit of legislation that he's put forth that would benefit anyone. And, you know, I just wonder when I look at somebody that I want to represent me, I want them to represent me. And when somebody is just there, I mean, he's literally just there in Congress, he's voting. I mean, I think he's got one of the best track records as far as voting in the House of Representatives.
So he shows up.
Okay. He is there.
He gets a participation award.
But the problem is, and this is where I get so angry, is this man is drawing a salary from the taxpayers. So he should be representing the taxpayers. I believe anyone who votes, and unfortunately too many members of Congress are this way, but anyone who votes in excess of 90% along party lines, how can they be doing their job? How can they actually be analyzing those pieces of legislation that are coming across their desk and determining whether it is good for the people? You should be doing a detailed cost-benefit, pro-con analysis of every single piece of legislation that comes across your desk, to not to know just how much it costs, but who is going to benefit from these pieces of legislation. And if you're voting 90% across party lines, then you're not analyzing anything. You're just doing what your party leadership tells you to do. Well, you know what? Anybody can go to Congress and do that. Anyone.
Right. We could roll dice and figure probabilities. Yeah. We wouldn't need people in Congress at all.
So that to me just doesn't make any sense. We need when you get to Congress, there should no longer be parties. You are there to do what's best for the people. And I know that when I go there, that's what I'm going to do. I don't care who presents something that needs to be analyzed and voted on. If I can be explained, or if I can have my staff analyze those bills and myself go through that analysis and determine who it benefits, how much it's going to cost, if that relationship is reasonable, then pass it regardless of whether that's a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. It doesn't matter. It's what is good for the people.
Right. I like that idea, and I'd like to see, obviously, all Congress people do that and share the results of their studies with the public, with their taxpayers and their voters in particular.
How important do you feel as a candidate and as a potential congressman does your work experience? I mean, let's go back. You've owned businesses, you've employed people, you've had to make the dreaded payroll, you've been accountable to customers on a routine basis. So you've got, as a business owner in this country, in this nation, particularly at this point in history, you are, the human Mr. Gumby. I mean, you're being pulled in 35 directions, but there's so many life lessons that come from that. I'm going to get touchy-feely for a second, but how has that impacted you over the years, and how do you feel that real politics, that hands-on sense, will impact your analysis as a sitting congressman?
It's funny because when I was operating my gas station, I operated a gas station for 13 years. I sold that 2 years ago. And I increased my sales threefold in the time that I operated the business. I went from a location that was doing about 300,000 in-store sales and about 300,000 gallons of fuel per year to a location that was doing about 1 million in-store sales and 1 million gallons a year.
Wow.
And so, but the horrible thing, and the thing that used to infuriate me about my working so hard, I mean, I would work, 30 days a month and, 8 to 16-hour days.
If you're awake, you're working.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what it was. And every year, even though I was growing the business, it seems like I would make less money. And it was like either the oil company or the government just figured out ways to get into my pocket. And it was so infuriating. It got to the point where at one point I looked at how much the government was taking out of those sales. And come to find out, just looking at the sales tax, the gasoline tax, and the cigarette tax, just those 3 tax items alone, the government, state and federal, was taking almost $1 million out of those sales, while my gross profit in those sales was about $250,000.
Wow.
And I had to pay all the bills. The government didn't pay any of those bills. I had to pay all the bills from that $250,000 in profit, while the government took $1 million.
While at the same time as an employer, and right now in society at large, a great deal of debate is going on about the role of the employee. We're looking to minimum pay wage issues, we're looking to quality of life issues, yet at the same time, little is done to look at the life and the pressures and the finances of those that would employ in the small business world. That's virtually ignored. I find great tragedy and great irony in that. No one's standing up and saying, when you calculate what the take home is for this gentleman who owns a business, who's responsible for so many lives and so many different issues and all the individual dramas that are accumulated as part of that what is he making per hour? What are the pressures like for him on the home front with this type of responsibility? Did that occur to you, or was that are you, when having run a business myself, are you so just lost in the fog of working through it day to day that you just assume that burden yourself?
Well, I mean, minimum wage would have been a big increase in many of the years that I operated that business.
Wow.
When you count the number of hours that I had to put in for what in many of the years was not very much income. And that's why, while I was running that gas station, I had to work a second job.
So, and we have a great deal of debate here on the coalition about the minimum wage issue. We talk about people having to work second jobs because they're making minimum wage. In a very real sense, as a business owner, and I've been there myself, you have to work 2 jobs in order to maintain the business.
That's exactly right.
Right, you're your own employee.
I don't see people picketing for people like you.
No. And, the sad part is, so often when you do operate a business, everybody thinks you're making all this money. And especially the government and your landlord and your suppliers, and they're always trying to figure out how they can get more money out of your pocket. It's so crazy, and I get so infuriated when I hear these politicians talk about how much they want to promote the small businesses, that the small businesses are the heart of what this country is all about. And yet, as a small businessman, I couldn't feel more disrespected from the government.
We really, as we go into the break, I just want to make one observation and your reaction to this. We've really come full circle in this country. You and I are probably similar in age, as is Mark Zaccaria, his campaign manager, is here as well, as opposed to the youngins in the rest of the studio. You and I remember a time, Mark, when you went to church or you went to school and your parents pointed out on Main Street someone who owned a local business. Mm-hmm. And that person was given a tremendous amount of respect. Look, there's Mr. He owns, she owns, he or she's got 10, 12 people working for them. They're really important to this community. We've gone from that to, you're the evil rich, right?
Oh, yes.
After the break, we're going to get into some very specific issues. We're just going to go down, and in the last 10 minutes, we have just kind of the rapid fire. We've got lots of issues to talk about. Tony?
I would be remiss to mention, P.O., that as we continue to recover from the festivities of last night, there's going to be a big event coming up on April 5th. We'll talk about that a little bit after the break right here on the Coalition. CoalitionRadio.us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on the almighty Twitter @Coalition_Radio.
Radio show, live events, and so much more. Check them out online at 13folds. That's the number 13, folds.com.
My name is Angel Rach. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, and I fought all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to use the medicine that saved my life. I've been permanently disabled for 10 years, with an inoperable brain tumor, wasting syndrome, and several other serious conditions. For 4 years, I was in a wheelchair, in so much pain, I couldn't even hug my kids. The hardest part was looking in their eyes and seeing how much they were suffering because of my medical condition. The medicine that gave me my life back and gave my kids their mom back was cannabis, also known as medical marijuana. With medical marijuana, I can walk, maintain my weight, and I can be a mom. Without it, my doctors believe that I would die. To learn more about medical marijuana, contact Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or on the web at mpp.org.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Jones. When I'm not here yakking about politics, I spin records. That's right, if you like good old-fashioned rock and roll radio the way God intended it to be, then tune in to The Tony Jones Show. The information's online at tonyjones.org. That's tonyjones.org.
Heading out on the town tonight? Be sure to log on to providencenightout.com and don't forget to check their cell phone app. That's providencenightout.com.
Tony Jones here. You are tuned in to the Coalition online at coalitionradio.us. As always, P.O. Taxpayer and Christine in the house. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
April
We're in the
5th,
house.
April 5th, P.O., we're going to be heading to your neck of the woods for a heck of a good time.
A heck of a good time. You know, if yesterday, with just a small portion of the group representing, we had as good a time with these folks, this is not to be missed. All right? Liberty Love Fest 4. Now, understand the dynamic here. You get a lot of Constitution-loving, freedom-embracing, sometimes gun-toting individuals who just really, to me, really represent for the American dream. A lot of these folks own their own businesses, you know, professional types. What's fascinating is here is you have a lot of folks who have, like Mr. Reis, our guest, have a lot of demands on their time. Yet at the same time, they've got family, responsibilities, careers. They represent a lot of the very best of America, and yet they are taking the time to really advocate for something very fundamental, which is the United States Constitution. You know, we talk about First Amendment rights, we talk about Second Amendment rights with this group, you know, Fourth Amendment, you know, we talk about search and seizure, we talk about all the things that really, the nuts and bolts of Americana, and how we got to this place right now where so much of that is in danger. So, you know, it's going to be a great event. You're going to have politics, you're going to have fun, you're going to have beer, you're going to have rock and roll. Tony, it doesn't get any better than that, and it's going to be right here in Cumberland.
LibertyLovefest.org. They're on Twitter at RILLF4. And
check our Facebook page and our Twitter feed for that address.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated.
We're going to be routinely posting about some of the featured rock and roll acts that are coming on, some of the discussions that are going to be held. We're going to be one of your sources for information about Liberty Love Fest 4. So mark that date down. What's that date again, Tony?
April 5th. And I just want to invite everybody listening to crash at P.O. Taxpayer's house
at the compound
after Liberty Love Fest.
I'm going to predict there probably will not be a snowstorm hovering over our heads. So it'll be safe to come out of your snow bunkers.
You just look for the barracks, like building.
Yeah.
Okay, and the aluminum foil roof. Well, again, just to go back in time a second, we are privileged here to have Rhue Reis, the Republican nominee, I guess you could say, for the 2nd Congressional District seat, currently occupied by, well, I'm trying to think, too, of the last time. We went to his Facebook page today. We won't mention him by name. We went to his Facebook page today. Two things struck me. Number one, I don't think it's been updated since last year. Number two, I did not see a single picture of a Rhode Islander featured on that page. I saw international stars of stage and screen. All right. I saw people talking about Obamacare. I saw all sorts of folks. I didn't see anybody from, I don't know, West Warwick, Westerly. You know, it's another milk carton candidate.
Not anybody from East Greenwich, even?
No, not even from Tony.
I could really use some
not
constituent
even the infamous
services.
Tony Jones.
You know, and we suffer as a state because of this. And we're going to get into some specific issues now. But my general sense, Rhue, is that when I look at all four federal officers for this state, you know, you've got two congressmen, at least for now. I guess in a couple of years that's maybe going away. But we've got two congressmen and two senators. Each one of them has got their hallmark issues, none of which have anything remotely to do with Rhode Island. So let's get down to some issues. You know, one of my disappointments for the current congressman was his stance on Obamacare. For years, he had led folks to believe, because of some religious convictions and some pro-life issues, that he was firmly entrenched against Obamacare. And yet, at the very last minute...
Whoops!
Yep. To quote the movie that's the source of all my wisdom, Animal House, you bleeped us, you trusted us. You can learn a lot from Animal House.
That's your new book coming out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything I ever needed to know, I learned in Animal House.
And remarkably, I don't, you know, as a pragmatist, I'm from Jersey. I'm a Rhode Island guy. I'm in the car business, all right? So if you're going to sell us down the river, all right, get something for it. Negotiate a little something, all right? As far as I can tell, these guys are good soldiers for the Democratic Party nationally, who I've got no use for. I love progressives. I got no use for these people in D.C. They sold us down the river, and I don't know. I'm not seeing any bridges or nuclear bases or you know, bridges to nowhere being funded, you know, by Rhode Island construction companies. So let's go down some issues. First of all, let's talk Obamacare. What's your take on how we got there and where we are with nationalized health. I mean Obamacare.
Well, I don't understand how anybody can call this piece of legislation the Affordable Care Act. I don't see anything that's remotely indicative of it being affordable care. I believe it probably should have been more appropriately called the Affordable Premium Act for the few who can't afford insurance. And that's about it. Because afterwards, to be able to afford the care that these programs are putting on the table, nobody's going to be able to afford it. I know of one of my family members who had to go on the Affordable Care Act. And they had the previous, they're self-employed, and they had to go on the Affordable Care Act. And the premium was a little bit more than they were paying before because they make a decent living. And but the care, the cost of care, the deductibles, and what is covered was not anywhere close to what they had in their previous insurance plan.
Wasn't the whole premise of this that there were a lot of people out there with health care plans that had been deemed inadequate by the Federalistas, and somehow we were going to come in and save the day?
That's correct.
Well, to be fair, there are some plans out there that were inadequate. However, there are some that were not inadequate, and it seems as if the insurance companies have used the initiation of the Affordable Care Act and the regulations to nullify some of their previous policies and policy classes. But it's not uncommon for an insurance company to take a look at one of its premium pools and say, we're losing money in this group. We're going to cancel the group, offer all the high-risk people something much more expensive and try to get rid of them, and offer all the people who we're not spending that much money on a comparable plan. And so basically this gave them an opportunity to do it again, but to blame the feds for it in some cases. That's not to say that Obamacare hasn't been a problem, but basically we've been doing too much to help the insurance companies continue business as usual. And that's basically what this is all over again. It's legislation that benefits a small number of very big businesses at the expense of a large number of very small businesses.
Where would you go from here?
As far as the Affordable Care Act is concerned?
I mean, assuming that unless something drastic happens, it's not going to be repealed. I don't know how that happens unless you have a complete sea change in Washington. And I don't even know if some of the mainstream, both Republicans and Democrats, want it repealed despite their protestations to the contrary. So is there something you suggest that we do to just somehow make it better?
Well, right now it seems like we don't have to do too much because it seems like the president's going to keep pushing it off and pushing it down the street. I guess he must recognize that it's going to hurt his party too much to let this plan actually come through the way it was designed to. You know, he's pushed off the implementation dates for smaller businesses, and till after the elections. Why? I mean, is the bleep going to hit the fan again, and like it did back in October? So obviously there's a lot of problems here, and the president recognizes that. His party recognizes that. So let's just keep kicking the can down the road. But in the meantime, the people who had plans and these plans are going to cease, what are they going to do? I mean, it's just just a disaster that we're going to be walking into, and I don't know what the answers are there. I mean, certainly Mr. Langevin, Mr. Reid, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Cicilline, they must have the answers. They've been experienced, seasoned politicians who have had their hands in this for years. I mean, clearly they've got the solutions. I know that the Republican Party was putting forth alternatives and different approaches to addressing the health care issues, but the president didn't want to listen. And now we're stuck with this monstrosity that's going to take out whatever little winds that have been blowing in the sails of the economy are going to be totally diminished. And this was supposed to help. This was supposed to help the less fortunate and give coverage to those who didn't have it, take away the burdens on the emergency care services, and direct people towards doctors. But what about these people who have more serious issues? They are going to have such crazy deductibles that they couldn't afford the insurance before. They certainly can't afford the deductibles that are going with this program. So is it really affordable care? I don't know. I certainly don't think so.
The state of Rhode Island, in let's call it a unique wisdom, decided to embrace their own health insurance exchange, and because initially it was funded by the federales. The estimates that I am seeing bandied about are somewhere in the $25 to $30 million range, cost that we as a state are going to have to assume. Why we did this, Christine Ferguson, a handsome woman.
I'll bite my tongue this time.
Okay, has decided in her wisdom to create yet another bureaucracy. In fact, the only growth I see going on downtown is over by Royal Little Place, because we've got a new burgeoning bureaucracy set up next to down by AAA. So we're going to be faced as a state with a decision over the next few weeks. To either, remember, we've got the 38 studios, which our Rhode Island government seems hell-bent to pay. We've got this other now unfunded, it's become an unfunded mandate. What do you suggest the state of Rhode Island do? And as a sitting congressman, how would you try and work this out with this health insurance exchange that we've inherited now?
Boy. I can't understand for the life of me why programs are rolled out when there's no realistic savings and there's only going to be increased costs and there's more of a burden to the public. So, for me, all I've done is work. I've worked 2 jobs for the last 13 years. And I have not been involved with this whole healthcare process. I am anxiously looking forward to getting my hands very dirty in going through all this legislation to be able to determine what needs to be changed and to be very much involved with making those changes and working with Democrats and Republicans alike to take this mess and to fix it so that it does what it was intended to do, give affordable care to everyone.
Is it fair to say that Mr. Langevin should be held accountable for failing to anticipate the funding requirements of the health insurance exchange?
Oh, absolutely. That the Affordable Care Act was a piece of legislation that was solely passed by the Democrats in Congress. Not a single Republican vote. So clearly, the Democratic Party should be held responsible for that bill.
Let's move on to an issue. Our show is heavily rooted in the libertarian movement in this country. Let's talk about privacy and how it's been impacted by the federales. Mr. Langevin. And I don't want to talk. Well, you're here to shine, but it's important because Mr. Langevin has had outsized roles in a couple of these issues. Mr. Langevin's claim to fame is his near obsession with cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Anyone been to Target lately? That being aside, Mr. Langevin continues to support. And progressives should be as outraged by this as we as libertarians are. Continues to support the use of the NSA apparatus to spy on ordinary Americans, while at the same time, as we approach the anniversary of the Boston bombing, be remarkably ineffective in preventing terrorism. What's your thoughts on privacy and the NSA and listening in on cell phone calls?
Oh, I think it's disgraceful. I think that the government has no right to invade our privacy. I mean, I think one of my philosophies has always been not to use fear to motivate people. And that's exactly what the government does. They use the fear of terror to try to take our guns away from us. They use the fear of terror to give them the right to invade our privacy. And to me, that's totally against what our founders put in the Constitution. And it just sickens me. It sickens me, the thought that the government can listen to and look at my private conversations with other individuals, and it just, I don't think the government has any right to do so. The government has other means to provide security for its citizens, not tromping all over the Constitution and our rights to our own privacy.
Okay. War on drugs. Again, remember, you're in libertarian country here. All right. Do you think the war on drugs has been a failure or a success?
I think the government needs to spend more, make more of an effort on the war on drugs. I mean, it's one of the things that is hurting this country, the fact that there is so much drug abuse out there. Once again, I know of people who have fallen into that pit, and it's very difficult on the families and certainly those individuals. And you know, I just...
Do you think they should spend more money on addiction or more money on...
I'm sorry, more money on what?
Interdiction, or should they spend more money on treatment and education?
Well, I think there needs to be a balance. I would say, I don't know what exactly the government is doing in that regards as far as interdiction is concerned. As far as treatment, well, to me, I just have a hard time even saying those words of the government spending more on anything. I mean, my whole belief is that the government needs to more effectively spend what they are spending and really be scaling back and looking at where they are ineffectively spending money. I'm sure they're spending enough money on the war on drugs. It's just that they're not doing a good enough job of it.
Okay. Next issue, since we're kind of working through all the big ones, tax reform. What's your thoughts on the tax code in the United States? What would you do? There's this constant contention that there's the 1%. Some of us would argue that the 1% is actually the employees of the government itself. That's a libertarian thing. But tax reform, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe that the government should be have better control on their spending, and in so doing, provide tax relief for the middle and lower classes. I mean, they're the ones who can least afford it. They're the ones whose real pay is going down. So if anything, they're the ones who need relief, and they're the ones who are going to bring the economy back. So as far as tax reform, absolutely, but that comes with spending controls.
The single biggest issue facing America right now, some would argue, actually represents a form of national security, is in fact the deficit. What were your thoughts on the government shutdown?
It didn't bother me. The government shutting down, I believe it gives them a chance to reel themselves in, to realize what is absolutely necessary and what is not necessary. I believe there's many aspects of government. I often question, how effective is our Department of Education, our Department of Energy, when when we see our oil productions at their highest levels ever, and yet our gasoline and energy costs are still at their highest. So what is our energy department doing? I don't understand this. I mean, with U.S. oil production so high and becoming even greater than what we bring in, with the supply going up like it is, shouldn't the price be coming down? I mean, the economy's down, so I can't imagine that the demand for oil is up. I just don't understand why the price is still up so high. Where's our Department of Energy? How come they're not, doing their job to bring energy prices down? They've opened up the supply, so how come the prices aren't coming down? So what are they doing? Why are we spending all this money on Department of Energy and Department of Education? I mean, if we have so much invested in our Department of Education, you would think that the kids that are graduating from our high schools would be able to read at a higher level. So if they're not doing it, leave it to the states. Let the states do the job. That's what our Constitution was written about. I mean, the 10th Amendment is leave the power to the states that the states are supposed to be taken care of. And education is one of them. We need to scale back the federal government. The central government is way out of control. They don't have any sense of spending within a budget. I couldn't do it. When I operated my businesses, if I didn't operate at a profit, I was out of business. Nobody was going to cut me a check and say, oh, don't worry about it, Mr. Reis. Yeah, the deficits are okay. Here's some extra money. That'll cover your deficits, and you can keep going. We need people in Congress who have a sense of balancing a budget.
The last quick question in the 1 minute remaining in our lightning round here. Syria and Libya, quick responses. Would you have invaded? Would you have supported the terrorists? I'm sorry, the liberationists. Mental error there.
There's a fine line between a terrorist and liberationists.
What's your thought about Syria and Libya?
I would not. I don't agree with getting involved unless it's an absolute atrocity. I mean, I do see that what is going on in Syria is gut-wrenching. But do we really know the facts? And that's one of the things about the way this government operates that scares me. That this whole, going back to the Bush days, when we went into Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. Well, there was never any found. We got ourselves involved in this big, costly mess, costly not just financial, but the lives of our young kids. And now we're going to do the same in Syria. Look what happened in Libya. We invested there. We lose an ambassador and some heroes.
Unfortunately, we do have to hold it there. Real quick, let everybody know how they get in contact with your campaign.
Go to Reis, that's Reis, REIS, forcongress.com. That can be with the number 4 or FOR. Either way it works, reisforcongress.com.
Log on there today while you're logging on to, of course, coalitionradio.us. P.O. Christine, great job as always.
Liberty Love Fest 4, baby. Can't wait.
It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a hoot.
A hootenanny.
Don't forget to check out facebook.com/thecoalitionradio and, of course, on Twitter at @coalition_radio. My name is Tony Jones. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.